First ones I want to talk about is this phrase would not have and how Americans use this in writing versus in speech. These same topics for would not have, wouldn't have. We can also talk about should not have and could not have. Of course, these modal verbs are very useful and important in English, so let's talk about the actual pronunciation. Typically, we would not use would not in speech. In writing, we can use would not. The only time I use it in speech is if I'm trying to clarify. Somebody said, you would do that, and I might say, I would not do that if I wasn't clearly understood. Typically, though, not doesn't get any stress, and so what happens is we make it into the contraction wouldn't. I wouldn't have done that. And so generally speaking, when it comes to would not, could not, and should not, focusing on saying wouldn't, couldn't, and shouldn't is going to be really useful for your fluency and for sounding like a native speaker. But how do I pronounce wouldn't? That's also tricky. So when I say wouldn't, you might find it easier to say would not, but it will still sound accented even if you're pronouncing it correctly because Americans don't use it. So wouldn't, the trick is that I don't release that D. The letters OU have the sound, like in good or book or push. The D is unreleased, wouldn't. So what I do is I basically go up to make the D and then I release right into the N. That's called a syllabic N. So thinking about lifting the tongue for the D, wouldn't, wouldn't. But you don't really let that D out. Not wouldn't, but wouldn't. And then I also have an unreleased T. So it is tricky to say wouldn't. You have to be very short on your N and unreleased on the T and the D. One thing that actually makes it a little bit easier is that when we don't say wouldn't have. Typically, we also, in speech, make a contraction out of have. So in writing, you can write would not have or wouldn't have. In speech, you're probably going to say wouldn't have. Now, you're not going to write it this way because we don't have double contractions like that, but typically we will say it that way. And this is wouldn't have is harder to say than wouldn't have, because when we add the contraction of the v sound, wouldn't have, then we can get rid of the T. So what you really will hear when people are saying would not have sounds like wouldn't have, which is why when kids who speak this, say this, try to write it down, they might write wouldn't of, the word of, because it's the same as pronouncing. So kids will write would of, wouldn't of, because that's how it sounds, even though we contract that as would have. So I do have a video for would have, could have, and should have, talking about the spelling, the pronunciation of that. When it comes to wouldn't have, thinking about that as wouldn't have. And that D, again, is not really released, so it's almost like wouldn't. It doesn't go right to the N. You do have to stop the air for the D, but this may help you when it comes to pronouncing would not have the way native speakers do, wouldn't have. So that's a complicated phrase, but thank you for that request, because many people probably notice that this is how we do it in speech, and it doesn't really match the rules for writing. Speaking and writing are two different things when it comes to English. This is proper grammar. It is correct and formal. You can use it in professional speech. So it's not slang to say, I wouldn't have known that. You can use that in a job interview, in a professional context, whatever it might be. But you don't write it. You just say it. Okay, thank you for that request. We do have a number, I do have a number of additional words and requests to cover. So the next request that I want to cover for today is the word insurance. And the viewer's question about insurance was that they noticed had some questions about the stress in this word. So the error might be that you might hear someone say insurance, and what we want to be stressing is on the sure syllable. In the IPA, you're going to see that marked with a line before the sure syllable. Insurance. And then, of course, there's also some tricks here with the reduced syllables, as in letter A not really making a sound here. We have another syllabic N. So let's break it down. The first part of the word, the in, is straightforward. It's just like the word in, but you don't want to be long on it. Not insurance, but insurance, insurance. So thinking of that as really short. One strategy to get that correct is to start on the stressed syllable sure. Letter S says the sh sound, so I'm going to rewrite that with sh in this word. It is actually just like the word sure, which some people say, like I've been saying here, with an sure. Some people say that more like sure, with an oo vowel. Both are correct. I find in words like insurance, it's easier for me and more natural for me to use the rather than the So in sure, the letter CE say the S sound. So now what's happening with this A here, insurance, we basically have no vowel sound. So we go right from the vowel, or from the R sound to the N. So that's called a syllabic N. We've talked about that in a number of other contexts. For example, words like button or mountain. We don't say button, mountain with a vowel for that letter O. We just say the N sound, and it functions like a syllable. Syllables always have to have a vowel, so the syllabic N and the syllabic L have the N and the L sound function like the vowel. You can get more help for syllabic L and syllabic N in my videos for that, as well as in our Sounds of English course. I cover all of the different sounds of English, how they're spelled, what errors you might be making on them. So that's a really good way to get more detail and more information about sounds, spelling, and pronunciation. Check that out on speechmodification.com. It's our Sounds of English course. So for the N sound, what we want here is short, long, short. Insurance. So that we go from the and then we do an N and a S sound together. Letter CE say S. So there's your request for the word insurance. We also had a request for the word fear, so we're going to do that next. And while we're talking about fear, I do also want to talk about the word fair. I know for some people, the difference between the ear and the air glide is challenging. So I do think of the ear as being spelled E-A-R, even though we have many different ways we can spell the ear sound. It goes from the E, tense E, to the so you'll see it like this in the dictionary. Sometimes they write it with an fear, but I think it's easier for people to think about a word like fee and fear, staying bright on that E sound. And then for fair, we also have this spelling, like pay your fare, or it's fair. We have the air diphthong, which I think of again as like the word air. You may see that in the dictionary this way, like fair, but I again think that we use that A, that tense A, when we're saying fair. So for fair, you may want to think about fair. The other thing that I think is probably helpful for most people is to leave the F off at first. So just try saying air, stay open on that A, air, and then ear, you're going to be more closed. Then once you can say air and ear, add your F sound back, fair and fear. If you find it difficult to do it in these minimal pairs, you may want to say another word like I hear with my ear. The pair was fair, etc. The spelling can be confusing with these R diphthongs. For example, just thinking about pear, we also have pear that you eat, spelled like ear but pronounced like air. So look for the dictionary if you're uncertain about what vowel should be in the word. You can also check out my video about R diphthongs. I go through ear, air, or ire, all the different combinations we do with the R in diphthongs, and it helps you, I show you the placement, I help you to understand how those are spelled and watch out for common words for that. That's our R diphthongs video. It's also part of our Sounds of English course on speechmodification.com. Okay, thank you for that request. I also want to cover the word around. So that word around, for around, what's important here are two things, the vowel sounds and then also the stress pattern. So again, I would build this word from the word round. That's the stressed syllable. The is short and unstressed. It's Vowel Schwa, which looks like this. You'll see the stress marker. And then the vowel in round is the ow diphthong. So I'm moving from something more open and unrounded, ow, then I'm closing, it becomes less tense and more rounded. I usually write that with letters OW because of the words like now and cow, but OU is another common spelling for the ow diphthong. So you may want to build from ow and then adding your R. This is going to look like row, so remember it's row in this word, row, around, round, around. When we say around, we don't say a strong D like around, unless we're linking it to a vowel, like around it, then you clearly say your D. Otherwise, you're going to have an unreleased D there. I'll be around. A little light. You might hear it released or unreleased, but stay light on your D unless you're linking. You might also pair it with another word to remember the vowel. For example, now, I'm around. Thinking about that kind of spelling can be helpful for you. I do have a number of videos about words that start with A, like around, and about, because that's definitely an important thing to recognize, that Vowel Schwa sound, what the stress patterns are in those words. Okay, we also had a question about the word transparency. So transparency. I'm not sure about the spelling. So transparency has our air diphthong. So again, building from air, pair, transparency. We're stressing on the pair. So transparency. We may even have almost no vowel here as well. Transparency. You see how quickly that unstressed syllable goes by, and not a lot of vowel sound there. Transparency. I hope we'll have transparency in this transaction. Yes, and this a in trans is the a vowel like black cat, the a vowel. Okay, thank you for that request. By the way, if you have a request you'd like to see me cover in our Word of the Day series, you can leave that in the comment for this video or any of my videos, and I'll cover it in a future class. Saturday, we'll have our live question and answer class where you can attend, type your questions in the chat, and I'll answer them for you live. So that's a great way to get your questions answered. And also, of course, channel members, those who've joined as channel members, can leave their requests at any time throughout the week. I cover those for them each week on Sundays. They can also attend our live class just for channel members on Sundays. So do check out the resources. When you go to the channel page, you can look at the community page and see what's coming up. You can leave your requests and comments there as well. Take advantage of all the different resources that the channel has to offer so that we can, it's focused on you and your needs and your requests. Okay, we had a request for the word tenure. So let's take a look at that. So in the word tenure, we have first syllable stress. It does start out just like the word ten. That has the vowel. I do have a video for 10 and men helping you with that vowel. I think sometimes when there's the N, it's harder for people to say that. So thinking about that, it's the same vowel in the word get. I want to get tenure may help you. And then here's our letter U that says two sounds. So sometimes U just says oo or Other times it says U or ya. It has the gliding ya sound. So we often spell that ya sound with letter Y if it has a letter. But sometimes with letter U, we don't have a letter for the ya sound. We just have the letter U. So tenure. So in this case, it's more of a sound, tenure, tenure, because that syllable is unstressed. So it might be in a word like, other words have the oo or the ya, and here we have the ure is going to say the sound, so tenure. So longer on 10 and shorter on year. He hopes to get tenure in the next year. He's a tenured professor. Okay, great. Definitely a little bit confusing on that one for spelling versus the sounds. When you see it this way, it may help you more closely match the way we pronounce it versus the way it looks when you just look at the spelling. Okay, let's take a look at our next word. We have the words solid versus salt. So this was another recent request. Solid has two syllables, so that's going to be one of the main differences here. And letter O says the ah sound. So that is very typical in American English. If you think about many words that say letter O we say that with the ah sound. Many people associate the ah sound with letter A because that's how it works in their native language, but in English, ah is spelled with letter O most of the time. So we have the vowel you'll see in the IPA looks like an A. Solid. So writing it like this. The second part of the word is just like the word lid. It has the vowel I like in it or in lid. So solid. And then salt, salt, salt. So you can say that as salt. I want some alt with an ah sound, salt. I think I often say that salt. I want some salt with more of a schwa. That's an interesting one. I should probably look that one up in the dictionary, get a little bit more reference. But when we're talking about like salt and pepper, salt, I guess I am somewhere between the and the salt. A little bit of schwa there too. That's definitely a tricky word. So again, I would say for the viewer that was asking about this distinction, what you want to notice is that solid, you're going to have two clear syllables. Salt, you're going to have that letter L really affecting how you say that vowel sound. So you're still going to be in the salt, but not open, salt. So you're going to have that letter L is really going to affect how you're saying that vowel. And more importantly, salt, one syllable. So solid, you have plenty of time to hear that and the L starts the next syllable, solid. Whereas in salt, I think it's really moving more towards this sound. So you might even think about it like salt. Okay, thank you for that request. Stumped me a little bit there on that word salt. I think now I'm going to have to make a new video just talking about the word salt because it was definitely challenging for me to recognize what vowel was there. But that's a good demonstration for you that even native speakers can be influenced by the letter that they see in the spelling and find it challenging to determine what vowel they're hearing. That often happens when there's an L in the word as well, because it can affect how we say vowel sounds. And there's a little bit of a variation and continuation between the and the vowels in American English. So that's definitely one of the factors in that as well. Okay, wonderful to see so many of you. Let's do just a couple more words and then we'll wrap up for today. I also want to talk about the word carrot. This was a recent request. So we have, again, 2 syllables. The challenge here is that the air is spelled with letters AR here. So earlier when we were looking at fair, we saw that with AIR. I do like to think of that diphthong as the air diphthong. We also spell that air with an A and an E, like in care. So you may just want to think about it like carrot. And again, letter O doesn't say anything O-like. It's going to say either an I sound or a schwa sound. So carrot or carrot for syllable stress. Yes, you can also think about the word carry. In some places, for example, in New York, they'll say that rather than an air sound, they'll say it more like an air sound with the carrot. But that's pretty specific to some regional accents. So generally in American English, you want to go with air in carrot and in carry. Okay, and then we had a question about the word behold. So I just said that just now with an E sound, like behold, because I was saying it by itself. But actually the pronunciation here is going to be an I sound because the hold is what's stressed. So we have a clear vowel on the O, but a reduced vowel on the letter BE. So it sounds more like behold, behold. If I'm saying it by itself, though, sometimes, again, that letter E is going to influence how I hear it. So I might say a little behold if I'm going slowly and just saying the word by itself. But if I'm saying behold the beautiful flowers, it's going to be an I sound like in it. So behold. It's beautiful to behold. This isn't as commonly used in everyday speech. It tends to be more written. We might use it for humor, or we might use it in kind of cliches like we need to behold her beauty, etc. So that's definitely why you maybe don't hear people using it in speech as much, and that might be why this person requested this word. Okay, we have a question. We had a request for the word spreading. So in the word spreading, letters E-A often say E, but in this word they say eh. So it's like the past tense read, present tense read, past tense read has the eh vowel, the same as this kind of read. So it might help you to think of it just as though it would make more sense really to spell it that way, spread, spreading. And then we have the ing sound. So the IPA is going to be like this. You'll see the eh red tent vowel, and then our typical ing ending, spreading. Great. Another word that is like that would be this word breading, like the breading on something. Yeah, spreading, breading. They have the same sounds as bedding. That would be a more consistent way normal way of spelling it.